for more are ABC News political director Rick Klein and CBN News chief political analyst David Brody. Rick, to you first. You know, we see the president wanting to shut down the border. Mexico, of course, is our third largest trading partner. And then there's all of these migrants coming to the border, creating a lot of problems down there. Is this about solving the immigration crisis, or is it really more, in your opinion, about 2020 and fulfilling campaign promises?
We'll see if he follows through. He's threatened this before. You know, I talked to the Senate Homeland Security chairman, who's an ally of the president, Senator Ron Johnson. He says it's not actually practical to close the border entirely. So some of this is rhetoric. Maybe it's about trying to get the Mexican government to a negotiating table. I think a lot of it is colored by the fact that this president made this commitment regarding the border. He has obviously been very fixated on getting his border wall, and I think part of it is associated with that.
And, you know, if I can just add in, some of his critics will say he's crazy enough to do it. I mean, and there's that, you know, that Trump wild card. You know, that's exactly where he wants his enemies and, quite frankly, everybody to be. This idea that, you know, he may just do it, and that gives him leverage to a degree. Also, he looks at everything in terms of money. You know, and I understand there's a bigger picture here in terms of you dry up the money in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, you risk, you know, these communities becoming less stable. But he just says, you know, what are we getting for it, right? I mean, same thing with G20, same thing with Iran deal. I mean, every trade, China, everything is about fairness. We're not going to take it, America first, all that. But money seems to be the common denominator a lot of times.
Jenna just hinted towards 2020. Joe Biden is in some political hot water over his affectionate, what some might call inappropriate style. You've already seen some Democrats begin to circle the wagons around him. Do you think that this will, for both of you, keep him from running?
No, I don't think so. Though I'd be curious to get your opinion, Rick. I guess we'll get to that in a moment. No, I don't think so. I feel like he's stuck in 1979. You know, I just feel like, you know, this type of conduct. Look, I'm not saying anything about the conduct. I'm not condoning it or saying anything about it. But in 1979, this conduct compared to today, there is a different barometer. There's a different bar today. And that poses a problem for the Democrats. I mean, you're going to come out and be part of, you're going to lead the Me Too movement, the hashtag Me Too movement, and then you have this. Well, where does that make Joe Biden fit in all of this? I mean, I think that's a real problem for Democrats. And I will just say about evangelicals, sorry, you can't say anything right now. I mean, if you're going to support Donald Trump, there's nothing you can say about Joe Biden when it comes to character issues.
I think for him, the rules have changed. I think David's right. He is, even since he left politics just 3 years ago, they've changed. And certainly since he first entered the Senate in, 1974, things are just different now. And all of it gets looked at differently. And I think if he is going to run, he has to appreciate that all of this is on the table. And his handling of the Anita Hill hearings, we're talking about his handling of the busing issue in the mid-1970s, his flip-flops or his changing positions on abortion rights. All of these things are fair game for Democrats to look at. And the party is so different than the party that he came up in. And part of that's his appeal. There are a lot of Democrats that would like to go back to the good old Joe Biden days where they felt like they were a working class appeal that Democrats like Biden could appeal to. But the party is so different right now. And this is going to be a rough moment for his pre-campaign. His people around him have said that they've always expected that things could come out and that wouldn't affect his decision making. But man, it's hard to imagine that you don't look at all of the events of the last few days and wonder if that gives him pause.
David, I want to circle back to you because you had mentioned what evangelicals, their critique of this. But White House Counselor Kellyanne Conway criticized Biden, calling him crazy or creepy Uncle Joe. Given her boss's checkered past, does that kind of create an awkward situation?
Yeah, it does, for sure. And, you know, I just think this is one of those things the White House has to leave alone. But, yeah, good luck, Donald Trump, leaving this alone. He's not going to do that. Matter of fact, you know, because remember, the White House official position, or at least Trump's official position, is I didn't do anything wrong. I mean, he hasn't admitted to anything. So, look, if he can figure out, Trump, if he can figure out a way to win at whatever game he's playing, and a lot of it's three-dimensional chess, and some would call it Parcheesi, but whatever he's playing, he'll figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, Rick, on health care in 2020, President Trump, he wants to do with Obamacare. A lot of Republicans, people in his own party, are saying this has not been a winning issue for us in the past. Why are we revisiting it now? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the most telling response to me was Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader. He says, I look forward to seeing what Donald Trump and Speaker Pelosi come up with, which means it's not my problem, guys. I am not dealing with that. I've dealt with it already. I think as we learn more about what drove this push in the lawsuit that was filed just last week, you recognize the president continues to think this is a winning issue, and there's very few around him that think the same. The Democrats essentially won control of the House on this issue. They were obsessed with pushing this as hard as they could. Republicans had to play defense throughout the campaign, and the bottom line is if Obamacare was ruled unconstitutional, thrown out tomorrow, there is no plan to replace it, and millions of Americans would probably suffer pretty dire consequences.
David, back to the Mueller report. We wanted to talk about that. It fell flat for a lot of these Democrats, but they're not letting it die. What do you think their end game is here? What are they trying to get at?
Well, I've been kind of on record, if you will, from an analysis standpoint about when are you going to stop digging the grave? I mean, look, the top line of Mueller is no collusion. I mean, so you can go to the underlying evidence, and these are the words we hear: underlying evidence, underlying evidence, underlying evidence. And I get it. They're trying to create their own special counsel. They're trying to find any nook and cranny they can possibly find to create that narrative and keep the cloud going. But at some point, you've got to just say, look, it is what it is. And this whole idea that Gerald Nadler is going to now subpoena or he wants the unredacted report, I mean, now you're talking about national security issues. And I understand it's going to be a legal fight and it's never going to be unredacted. But the fact that they would even want that, I think, is a bit problematic.
This is a bit of a political gamble for Democrats, is it not?
Yeah, I think they were dug pretty far in on this. But David's right. The top line is no collusion. It's hard to imagine someone else is going to find collusion if Mueller didn't. The question of obstruction is a legal one that I think will come out through the final say. I think we're going to know most of what Mueller found, and most of the report is going to come out in some form or fashion, and then Democrats have to decide whether that's enough or not. There's going to be people pushing him in either direction.
Well, gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it right there. ABC's Rick Klein and CBN's David Brody. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you both.